Islamophobia, or pervasive and perverse Islamophobia in our society. And we all pay a price for that hatred.
That's what it sounded like Tuesday in London, Ontario, during the public vigil held at the Oxford Street Muslim Mosque for the victims of the murderous hate crime. You've all heard the news about how 5 members of a Pakistani Canadian immigrant family out for a Sunday evening stroll were deliberately mowed down by a hit-and-run driver. Some of London's Jewish leaders joined the vigil in person. So did Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the leaders of all the major federal parties. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford and other provincial leaders were there too. There were over 10,000 people at the event. Over 80 households from the city's Jewish community attended virtually via Zoom. The event was broadcast on the Jewish Federation's Facebook page for those who felt they shouldn't be attending such a large public gathering during COVID.
We're glad that there's so much support from the wider Jewish community and from all of Canada. We know that there's no place for this kind of hate, discrimination, terrorism, or Islamophobia in Canada.
I'm Ellin, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. Welcome to the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. London's Jewish community of about 3,000 people has been upset and saddened by the recent attack. Coming up, we'll hear from one of London's Jewish leaders. But first, I want to play a clip for you from the vigil that is causing waves of anger in the Canadian Jewish community. You might have missed it if you didn't watch the whole thing. It came at the very end, after over 2 hours of speaker after speaker calling for unity and an end to hate. And then Imam Dr. Munir El-Kassem from the Islamic Centers of Southern Ontario took to the stage. And he made this stunning and potentially dangerous accusation. He basically blamed Israel and Canada's policies in the Middle East for the murder of the London family.
Now, there's a reason why they say the world is a small village. Every country has a foreign policy. I just want to say, whatever is happening in Jerusalem and Gaza is related to whatever happened in London, Ontario. Period. Thank you.
Those comments have already prompted condemnation from some quarters in the Jewish community. B'nai B'rith Canada says linking this horrible crime to Jews or Israel is an irresponsible and inflammatory act, and they want Dr. Munir El-Kassem to retract his remarks. Human rights and Holocaust activist Avi Ben Lolo says he was disappointed that one of the speakers politicized this hate crime, especially, he writes, as we have seen a skyrocketing of anti-Semitism and violent attacks against the Jewish community. London's Jewish community has had a good relationship with the Muslims in the city, according to Eric Robinson. He's program director at London's Jewish Federation, which is about a 10-minute drive away from the mosque where the vigil took place. I spoke to him Tuesday afternoon, shortly before the vigil started. What happened when the news broke in London and the Jewish community of London heard about it? And, what was the reaction?
Yeah, it's very tough with the pandemic. And, at first, we read in the story about a horrible car accident and there wasn't a lot of details released. And then started to be awareness that it might have been a hate crime and started to get more upsetting as we learned more about it. And, by the time I was speaking to other people about it, it was just shock that something this terrible could happen, this Islamophobic act of terrorism. This murder could happen right here in London. It's a city that we love and want the best for, and to have this travesty happen here, it shouldn't happen anywhere, let alone here in our city.
Have you had any dealings with the Muslim community? What is the relationship between the Jewish community and the Muslim community?
Yeah, by and large, London is a wonderful place to live. This is, one of the blackest marks in the city's history, if not, the worst altogether. It's just a tremendous, devastating thing. But we've had wonderful relations with all our neighbors, including our Muslim neighbors. There's an interfaith peace camp here in London that many people are involved in. There's several times a year, there's a interfaith tree planting led by Reforest London, one of the environmental components of the city's operations. there's, after the attack at the mosque in Quebec City, there was a vigil, and we got to know a number of people, and it was multi-faith vigil where rabbis from our community spoke as well, and those of us who work in the Jewish community got to meet people on staff at the mosque and in their community organizations, and also just general community members certainly interact. And of course, we work together all the time as people are in various jobs, and these are our friends, our neighbors. We know them from all aspects of life. But and then after the tragedy in Pittsburgh, we got tremendous support from the wider community in London, including the Muslim community, and we're grateful for that. So it's just, shocking and terrible news, and I'm so sad for the city and sad for the family involved, and for the Muslim community as a whole, and for all of London.
You sound really choked up about this. Did you have any personal knowledge of this particular family at all, or did anyone know them?
I did not know them. I'm sad by the very facts of the story, and the loss of human life, and the pointless loss of human life. There's no place for hate, or discrimination, bias, Islamophobia, and certainly terrorism in our town is unacceptable can't stress it enough, to the exponential order of whatever one could say.
So what is it that the Jewish community is doing about the vigil, and also reaching out? How are you showing support?
So normally when there's not a pandemic going on, our community would inevitably be out, and wanting to bond with our neighbors, and be a shoulder to lean on, and to collectively grieve. And with the pandemic, obviously, it makes everything so much tougher. So, there are going to be community leaders. Rabbi Clark is going to be there. Scott Goldstein, the Hillel director from Western, is going to be there. Members of our executive, including the president of our executive, Steve Tarrant, is going to be there.
Okay. And then what happens next? Is there a collection being taken, a special appeal? What is that? Anything else that the Jewish community there is doing?
Yeah. Next steps are still being worked out.
Okay. Is there anything you want our listeners to understand about what you're all feeling?
This is just a tremendous loss, and we're extremely sad and shocked by what had happened. And in the 9 years I've lived in London, this is not representative of our beautiful, wonderful city, and the community that, so many thousands of Jewish community members and many thousands of others help to make day in and day out. And we're glad that there's so much support from the wider Jewish community and from all of Canada. We know that there's no place for this kind of hate, discrimination, terrorism, or Islamophobia in Canada, just as there's not room for anti-Semitism or any other kind of hate.
London's Jewish community says it did have a briefing with the city police Tuesday about security issues for the community, as there has been chatter on the internet about whether the suspect might be Jewish because of his name. Although the latest reports say he is actually a Christian, police do plan to release more details about the suspect's background in the coming days. The CJN Daily is not naming the suspect. Meanwhile, other Jewish groups have also issued statements about the London incident. The Rabbinical Assembly of Ontario says Jews know what it's like to be a minority. And Independent Jewish Voices London branch says they support a call for an immediate national action summit on Islamophobia. They also suggest people should donate to a GoFundMe campaign set up by a neighbor of the Afzal family in memory of the deceased. The fund is called a Sadaqah Fund, which means charity in Arabic. We've put a link to it in the notes. So far, it's raised nearly $500,000 for 46-year-old Salman Afzal, a physiotherapist, his wife, 44-year-old Madia, who was just finishing her PhD at Western, their 15-year-old daughter Yumna, a grade 9 student, and for the children's 74-year-old grandmother Talat. 9-year-old Fayez Afzal survived the attack and remains in hospital. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia, integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Let me know what you think about whether the imam's final message consists of hate speech against Jews, and about the applause his remarks received. you can drop me a note at ebessner@thecjn.ca. We'll close with more from the vigil, where mosque board member Nasiba Al-Azim asked the crowd to tie purple and green ribbons to the fence in memory of the victims.
Purple was Yumna's favorite color, and green symbolizes the fight against the scourge of Islamophobia, an ode to the green square that we all wore after the Quebec mosque shooting when we swore that this would never happen again.